Going into the 13th and final round of Wijk aan Zee 2016, Magnus Carlsen led the field by half a point. He had 8.5. Caruana a half point behind with 8, and then Ding Liren with 7.5. So this was going to be a very tense final game. Carlsen faced Ding. Now, we joined the game after 20 moves, and I think Carlsen with white here has really the kind of position out of the opening that he wanted. He can play this endgame on with no risk whatsoever, and obviously white is slightly better because of black's damaged pawn structure. This pawn on e6 is isolated. But also these queenside pawns are, with the pawn on b5, just a little bit vulnerable to attack. Nevertheless, black is very solid, and this is actually a very well-known endgame. It's arisen out of the open Spanish, which seems to be a Chinese speciality at the moment. But as I said, a very well-known endgame. And curiously, this exact position, well, Carlsen now played bishop e3, this exact position was also reached in a game in the last round in Wijk aan Zee between Michael Adams and Wesley So. Wesley now played rook h5, and the game was drawn after not very many moves. Ding played rook e5 and c4 from Carlsen, and Carlsen began the process of attacking these weakened pawns. Now, Ding defended really doggedly. Carlsen was playing with his customary speed, but also great power. Well, as I said, Ding defended extremely well, but Carlsen did manage to squeeze the position and eventually got down to the endgame of rook and bishop against rook. Theoretically, this is a draw, but in practice, not so simple, particularly when you only get one shot at it, one shot at defending, and you're facing Carlsen, who of course is legendary at grinding out this kind of endgame. Well, let's see what happened. Ding played rook g2. Now, what he's doing here is setting up the so-called second rank defence, and this became quite well known in the late 1980s and is now the preferred method of defending this endgame. So why put the rook here? It looks really ugly. Well, basically white is trying to force the king to the side of the board in order to deliver checkmate. The problem is it's impossible for white to do that. I mean, white would like to play something like rook g8, but the rook can't stay on the 7th rank. White doesn't have time to bring the king in, so you give a check and the king bounces out again. So black is alright. So after rook g2, Carlsen started fiddling, played rook f8. So black has to find a good waiting move here. Well, king g4 is fine. And now bishop here. So now the rook is restricted. Now it's getting a bit tighter. But the king falls back. This is all part of the approved defence. And now white comes in. Now this looks absolutely critical because suddenly mate is threatened. But here's the trick. Rook g3. Of course, if that's taken, it's stalemate. That's the trick in the second rank defence. So Carlsen had to move the king away, and then rook checks, again forcing the king away, and black has survived that attack. But now white regroups and goes in for another attack. But now black switches the board, switches the defence by 90 degrees, and again falls back on this second rank defence. It's absolutely fine. There's still no successful attack here for white. And in some ways, I mean, I've employed this second rank defence myself, and actually it's once you know the basic ideas, actually it's surprisingly easy to defend. And Ding did that here very successfully. We're now on move 96. It's still 10 more moves or so till Carlsen crosses the 50th move barrier, but basically by this time Ding had proved that he could defend this ending, and after this move Carlsen took the rook, and it's a draw by stalemate. So successful defence by Ding Liren, but okay, that half a point meant that Carlsen was now a point ahead of Fabiano Caruana. Now Caruana was playing black against Tomaszewski. He played a very risky version of the Nimzo Indian as black. And after 19 moves, Caruana was rewarded with a totally lost position. Well, let's take a look at this. You can see Caruana's queen is somehow stranded on a2. These pieces look absolutely dreadful at the side of the board. White is well centralised. The rook has just come to c5, attacking the bishop. Here, if Tomaszewski plays in a very simple way, just exchanging on f6 and brings the knight back to d4, black is completely lost here. The knight is attacked. White is also going to trap that bishop at the side of the board with b4, and mopping up should be pretty simple because black's king is so exposed. You know, it'll be possible to actually switch over to an attack very, very easily. Knight h5. It's a simple win. But I think Tomaszewski's problem here was that he had too many good options. He played bishop e3, which is a good move, not a winning move. And I think he was surprised by queen takes b2 from Caruana, simply giving up the exchange. But suddenly the position has transformed itself, because this knight, which was doing nothing at the side of the board, suddenly finds itself with a very well protected, on a very well protected square, and his bishop is no longer in danger. Now, white is the exchange up, but black has a pawn for it, and suddenly not so clear. Well, black has to trade into an endgame here. So should be a good position for white. Now I'm going to leap ahead by 10 moves, and you can see that Tomaszewski has just improved the position of his king a little bit. He's managed to put his knights on these very good squares, and those knights prevent the rook activating. Caruana has advanced on the king's side. By this stage, actually, I mean, we're only on move 33 in this game, Tomaszewski-Caruana. By this stage, Carlsen and Ding had already finished their game. They played 3 times as many moves in the same time as Tomaszewski and Caruana. And Carlsen was watching this game in the live commentary, and he suggested that Caruana should simply hang tough here and retreat the knight and just solidify the position and wait to see how white builds up. Of course, white is better here, but it can still go wrong. Caruana played instead knight a4, and Tomaszewski played in a very kind of softly way. He's kind of, in my eyes, a very typical product of the Russian school of chess. You know, he plays very correctly. He doesn't rush into things. And little by little, Tomaszewski was improving his pieces. This move g4, now this is a bit rash from Caruana. I can understand why, you know, he was desperate to play for a win and try to create complications. But in many ways, this makes life much easier for white, because it actually damages black's position. And yeah, little by little, Tomaszewski just improved things. h3. So now Caruana exchanged and put the knight back on h7. Well, we saw this in Caruana's game against Van Velde. The knight not well placed here, and after e5 that locks it out from this good square, and the check on g5 does nothing. The king can simply retreat, and by this stage things are looking promising for white. f6 is really the only way to try to gain some counterplay here. Otherwise the knight would come to e4 and the rook down to d7 and looks absolutely dreadful for black. So Caruana still trying to stir things up, but Tomaszewski, technically very, very good player, and he managed to keep control here. So now he's looking at this weak pawn, and so he succeeded in trading off the bishop. That's good news. The more pieces you trade. Still targeting the e-pawn, and now here's a very important moment. Still targeting that e-pawn, and here white makes a massive step forward. With this move, Tomaszewski manages to trade rooks. And if you can do that in an endgame when you're the exchange up, that's a big deal. It's going to make life so much easier for that rook. Now, Caruana wasn't giving up here. He's trying to make life as difficult as possible, and that's a tricky move. If the pawn on e6 is taken, there's a knight fork. If the pawn on h5 is taken, again there's a knight fork. But Tomaszewski had it under control. He switched that rook round, and now you can see the power of the rook in this situation. When black doesn't have a rook to defend, then white's rook is all conquering in this position and can switch sides back and forth. And here we go, that rook just switches sides, and Caruana is now lost. I mean, in a way, black certainly can't improve on his play here. A4, good move, obviously undermining the protection of the knight on c4. And well, I'll just go through the final moves, but really there's absolutely nothing that Caruana can do here. And in this position, he resigned. If the knight takes the pawn, then rook takes a5 is a very unpleasant skewer. So there we go, Caruana resigned. So that means final scores at the top. Carlsen with 9 points, Caruana and Ding on 8. Well, what can we say about Carlsen? Supreme performance in this tournament. That's now the 5th time that he's won Wijk aan Zee, and he's hit a really rich vein of good form at the moment. He's now played 35 games without a loss, following his victory in London Chess Classic, and after that Qatar. So fantastic tournament for him. How about the other players? Well, Caruana, I think, could be pretty happy with his performance in spite of this last round loss, and I think he'll be pretty confident going into the candidates tournament in March. Looking a little bit further down, well, Ding Liren, 8 points, excellent score from him, and he's showing that he's such a dangerous player. Looking further down at the other candidates, Anish Giri, 7 out of 13. Well, he played in his very solid style, didn't set the world on fire here. And looking further down, Karyarkin, another candidate in March, he only scored 6 out of 13, and frankly he was a bit disappointing, but who knows, maybe he's saving his powder for March. But it was a really entertaining tournament, and I think the organisers need to be congratulated for gathering a really interesting and varied field of players. There was some really entertaining and fantastic chess played. So, thanks very much for watching these reports over the past couple of weeks. I'm going to be posting more reports on my YouTube channel, so if you'd like to subscribe, please do. It's free, and that will give you instant notification every time I post a new video. So, thanks everyone for your support, and see you soon.